Welcome to Andy's Climate Review. This is episode 2. Welcome and thanks for coming along to watch my video when you have millions of other options. I do really appreciate it. Now today I'm going to be talking about a story called the 97% versus the 3%. Just how much global warming are humans causing? That's from back in September 2014. Then we're going to look at some charts from January 2020 and some more charts based on the most recent IPCC report released this month. Spread on watching in the future. This is August 2021. Then we're going to look at a selection of web pages related to climate change. Then we'll look at the British Prime Minister's reaction to the IPCC report that I mentioned earlier and the changes that he has agreed to make. And then finally, we'll finish up with a few things that you can do to help slow climate change and climate destruction. So, let's do this. So this is the 97% versus the 3% story that I mentioned. It's an article from The Guardian on the 15th of September 2014. So a pair of climate scientists had a dispute regarding how much global warming humans were actually responsible for. Gavin Schmidt from NASA represented the consensus of 96 to 97% of climate experts in arguing that humans have been the dominant cause of climate warming since 1950, while Judith Curry from Georgia Tech represented the opinions of 2 to 4% of climate experts that we could be responsible for less than half of that warming. Curry is to be a featured speaker on this subject at a National Press Club event that would have happened on the 16th of September at the Marshall Institute, which is a right-wing think tank that has spread misinformation about the dangers of smoking, ozone depletion, acid rain, DDT and now climate change. She may also discuss the subject at an event next week or, the week after the 15th in 2014, hosted by the fossil fuel funded right-wing think tank Texas Public Policy Foundation. It's not surprising really, is it? The exchange between Schmidt and Curry can be read on Real Climate, which is a blog run by climate scientists. The discrepancy in both the quantity and quality of the supporting evidence used by each scientist was one of the most telling aspects of their debate. For his part, Schmidt referenced the most recent IPCC report at that time. The IPCC summarises the latest and greatest climate science research, so there is no better single source. I'm going to put up a chart in a minute showing the IPCC report illustrating why 96 to 97% of climate science experts and peer-reviewed research agree that humans are the main cause of global warming. So here's the chart I'm talking about. The black bar indicates the amount of global warming that's been observed between 1951 and 2010. The green bar shows the amount of warming that was caused by human greenhouse gas emissions during that time. The yellow is the influence from other human effects, which is mainly cooling from human sulfate aerosol emissions, which scatter sunlight, and the orange is the combined human effect. Below those are the contributions from external natural factors, mainly the sun and volcanoes, and from natural internal variability, which is mainly ocean cycles, while the whiskers, the little extra lines that you see there, show the uncertainty range for each. So again, this is from The Guardian, 15th of September 2014. So you can see very, very clearly the green bar is extremely high. It's we're probably over 1 degree already of warming, so that just gives you a massive idea of how fast this is happening. Now also bear in mind this is a 7-year-old report, so at that point we were seeing nearly 1 degree of warming. So the next set of charts get closer and closer to our current date and you'll see the difference. Okay, so now we move on to our very long list of charts. These first set of charts are a selection from the BBC story Climate Change, where we are in 7 charts and what you can do to help. I wasn't able to download all of these charts because some of them were moving charts and just wouldn't transport very well into PowerPoint, which is how I'm making this video. Sorry, I am a bit of a noob. Anyway, how much worse will the problem get? Well, look at the chart on the left there. It's crazy. So the blue at the bottom is following current pledges that have not yet been enacted. The green is following current policies that have been enacted, which still could take us to 3.2 degrees over. And if countries do not act, we could go up to almost 5 degrees centigrade above average. That would be an absolute catastrophe. Now, on the right, we've got the world's top emitters of carbon dioxide. This is from 2020, by the way, so it's about a year and a half old. So we've got China at the top, we've got US next one down, we've got the EU as the third one. So, you know, we've got basically the bigger countries, the higher income countries are the ones causing most of this climate change, or the carbon dioxide that causes climate change. One of our biggest helpers, let's say, towards climate change reduction is Germany. Germany has some amazing policies that they're part of. They've been recycling since I was 9 years old. I used to live there and recycling was normal. Turning off lights when you left the room was normal. It was all stuff that we were told to do as children, and we did it. And when I moved to the UK a few years later, I was quite surprised to see that these were things that were only just beginning in the UK. We're only just now at a point where we're recycling a lot of what we use, but even now there are issues with certain places where you live where you just can't get stuff picked up. Of course, you do have the option of going down to your local tip, and usually they have recycling centres, that's what they tend to call them now, and there are lots of places like that usually where you can take your stuff if it doesn't get picked up from your house. Something else I want to point out here is that the world's top emitters on the right there, this is not a blame game. This is just an idea of what's actually going out in CO2 emissions per year. The way I see it is the more CO2 someone else creates, the more we need to do as individuals and as countries to work against that. So it shouldn't be a blame game. Oh, China's not doing anything, so we shouldn't. Because if you do that, humans are going to go extinct. It's as simple as that. The planet will be fine. It will still be here in years, in millions of years. But there's a very good chance we won't be if we carry on this way. So we move on to the next pair of slides. We've got the fast growing cities that face the worst climate risks. This is based on population growth between 2018 and 2035 over climate change vulnerability. So the growing is at the bottom there. The more vulnerable countries are on the right and the less vulnerable are on the left. And we can clearly see here that Africa is going to take a lot of the hit. Asia is right in the middle there. We've got the Americas further down and Europe right at the bottom, and there's a couple of Oceania dots around. The bigger the circle, the larger the current population. Continuing on to the next chart on the right hand side, as you can see, beef has the biggest carbon footprint, but the same food can have a range of impacts. So if you look at the chart, you can see that the lowest impact of beef production is still more or less in the same range as the highest impacts from other foods. So, I mean, there are a few that are higher. Lamb, farmed prawns and chocolate all have a very highest impact. But then if you compare that to the beef highest impact, it's ridiculous. So this is based on kilograms of greenhouse gas emissions per serving of each of these foods. So it's all very clear there that a portion of the highest impact vegetable proteins emit less than the lowest impact animal proteins. So this is a really good case for cutting down on meat. In fact, cut it out completely if you can, because it is having the largest impact on everything. So if we can reduce the amount of beef, lamb, prawns, chocolate from rainforests, farmed fish, pork, chicken, all of those things are going to make a massive difference to the number of greenhouse gas emissions that we're putting out. Okay, so our next slide is from the most recent IPCC report in August this year, 2021. And this is another how much hotter could it get scenario chart. You can see very clearly at the top there, the future with intensive fossil fuel use lines up with the chart we were looking at earlier, where it will get to nearly 5 degrees centigrade rise by 2100. At the bottom there, we've got a green line showing the future based on sustainability, if people actually make the changes needed. And the three in the middle there just show some different scenarios that might include some countries doing something, other countries not doing anything, and a mixture of both. And you can see on the left the observed temperatures. We have already gone over the 1 degree mark, as I said earlier. At this point, we're just getting close to that 1.5 that we're supposed to be staying below. So if we don't do something soon, things are going to be really bad in about 80 years. And that's your children, your grandchildren. They're the ones that are going to have to deal with this if we don't. Moving on to the next slide, we can see that extreme heat will become more frequent. This is a projected increase in frequency and intensity of high temperatures, which only occurred once in every 10 years on average in a climate without human influence. So if you look across here, we've got every 10 years at present 1 degree centigrade warmer, which means we've got 3 or nearly 3, 2.8 times more likely to have a higher temperature than average, and it just keeps going up. 1.5 degrees, it becomes 4.1 times more likely. 2 degrees goes to 5.6 times more likely, and 4 degrees goes to 9.4 times more likely. And the increase in intensity is at the bottom here. 1.2 degrees will put us 1.2 degrees hotter. Well, that's kind of obvious. These are the future global warming temperatures. So you can see going across there, it's just insane. Again, it's going to get up to 5.1 if this increases in intensity and we don't do anything. On the right, we've got another chart here, well, an image to show how the world could get warmer. Now, this is the projected annual average temperature change relative from 1850 to 1900s at different levels of global warming. So 1 degree centigrade, you can see here, it's not too bad. That's more or less where we are now. The worst change there is, I think, about 2 degrees in the north of the planet, and then it carries on going up 1.5 degrees in the north of the planet again. It gets it worse. It starts to be a problem in Europe and Asia and Africa. At 2 degrees, it just keeps getting worse. It's even worse. The north of the planet is really going to take some battering. Probably all the sea ice will melt or something like that. And again, things start getting even worse in Africa, in South America, in all sorts of areas. And again, over to the 4 degree warming, basically everybody's going to be boiling hot, and you don't want that. So we'll do what we can to stop it, and I'll tell you some things at the end that you can do. On to the next slide. We can see here 2 more charts. On the left, we have the increase in extreme rainfall. Now, we've already had that in the last month. There have been floods in many countries around the world, And these are in some cases normal monsoon weather, but in the cases recently the rainfall has been much heavier. There's been a lot more of the rain, so the monsoons have been much more severe, and so you've ended up with severe monsoons in areas that normally get those, and areas that don't normally experience a lot of flooding are now experiencing flooding. So an increase in extreme rainfall, the projected increase and intensity of heavy rainfall in one day, which only occurred in every 10 years on average in a climate without human influence. So as you can see there, we've got 1850 to 1900. You might get one extreme rainfall time every 10 years. Now we're getting it 1.3 times. I believe the storms that were as bad as we've had recently were experienced approximately within the last 10 years. I think about 10 years ago actually. If we go up to 1.5, we're then 1.5 times more likely to have heavy rainfall within a period of 10 years. 2 degrees means 1.7 times, and 4 degrees 2.7 times. So you're looking at experiencing severe flooding in so many parts of the world, it's ridiculous. At least about 3 times in a 10-year period. So the increase in intensity is quite clear here at the bottom. 1 degree warmer makes the world 6.7% wetter. 1.5 degrees takes us up to 10.5% wetter. 2 degrees takes us up to 14% wetter, and 4 degrees takes us up to 30% wetter. So that is really bad, really bad. Like what we've just seen this last month, this could happen 3 times in a 10-year period because of this. So anyway, moving to the right, we've got the average sea level relative to 1900. Now, this is not necessarily directly related to extreme rainfall, but I imagine there are some links. So again, much like the chart we saw earlier, we have the future with intensive fossil fuel use, the line at the top, not the very top, but the orange line. Now the line above that says unlikely but high impact rise under a future with intensive fossil fuel use, including ice sheet instability. So that's a sea level rise of potentially 1.75 meters, whereas even just intensive fossil fuel use would be a meter. Now, if we do make the changes that we need to make, we will hopefully stay on this green line at the bottom here, which is just over 0.5 meter of sea level rise. Again, in the middle, much like the other chart that looked similar to this, there are also some other scenarios that would involve some countries not being involved on certain levels. So, potentially up to 1 meter rise with intensive fossil fuel use. And if it gets worse, the ice sheets instability, which is happening already in Greenland, and if that continues as predicted, then the rises will be extremely high, up to 2 meters nearly, and that's in just 80 years again, folks. 80 years. That's not very long when you think about it. That's literally your kids and your grandkids that are going to have to deal with this. At the end of the day, action against climate change is not political, it's not national, it is a worldwide problem, and we all need to be working on it, otherwise we will not get anywhere and humans will go extinct. So I don't really want to see that happen. It'll be after my lifetime's over, but I don't want that to be the future that everybody on the planet is looking at. Moving on, we're going to head to a couple of web pages next, and I'll show you some interesting information. Okay, so we've got an interesting web page here. This is from the ARU, and New Zealand is best placed to survive a collapse. This was published on 29th of July 2021, and it's also said that the UK also has a favourable starting condition to weather a major global shock. So, new research has examined the factors that could lead to the collapse of global civilization, with New Zealand identified as the country most resilient to future threats, which is quite interesting. The study was carried out by Nick King and Professor Aled Jones of the Global Sustainability Institute at Anglia Ruskin University. It focuses on decomplexification, a widespread reversal of the trends of recent civilization, potentially seeing the collapse of supply chains, international agreements, and global financial structures. This was published in the journal Sustainability. It's an open access study that explains how a combination of ecological destruction, limited resources, and population growth could trigger a reduction in the overall complexity of civilization, with climate change serving as a risk multiplier, exacerbating existing trends. Now, this could happen over a long descent, over years or decades, or it could happen very rapidly in the space of less than a year, with no warning of the coming disruption. The academics suggest that a hybrid of these might also occur, with a gradual initiation which gains momentum through feedback loops, leading to an abrupt collapse. The effects could spread quickly due to the increasing hyperconnectivity and interdependency of the globalized economy. The study identified 5 countries with the most favourable starting conditions to survive a global collapse by examining self-sufficiency, energy and manufacturing infrastructure, carrying capacity, land available for arable farming and overall population, and isolation, distance from other large population centres which may be subject to displacement events. This study found that New Zealand, along with Iceland, the United Kingdom, Australia, specifically Tasmania, and Ireland, were the nations currently most suited to maintaining higher levels of societal, technological, and organisational complexity within their own borders if a global collapse were to happen. All 5 are islands or island continents with strong oceanic climatic influence. They currently have low temperature and precipitation variability, and therefore have the greatest likelihood of relatively stable conditions continuing despite the effects of climate change. New Zealand, Iceland, the UK, Australia or Tasmania, and Ireland were then qualitatively assessed for their individual local scale energy and agricultural characteristics. This identified New Zealand as having the greatest potential to survive relatively unscathed thanks to its ability to produce geothermal and hydroelectric energy and its abundant agricultural land and low population. Iceland, Tasmania and Ireland also have favourable characteristics, while the UK presents a more complex picture due to its complicated energy mix and high population density. Although the UK has generally fertile soil and varied agricultural output, it has low per capita availability of agricultural land, raising questions about future self-sufficiency. Professor Aled Jones, Director of Global Sustainability Institute at Anglia Ruskin University, said, "Significant changes are possible in the coming years and decades. The impact of climate change, including increased frequency and intensity of drought and flooding, extreme temperatures, and greater population movement, could dictate the severity of these changes." As well as demonstrating which countries we believe are best suited to managing such a collapse, which undoubtedly would be a profound life-altering experience, Our study aims to highlight actions to address the interlinked factors of climate change, agricultural capacity, domestic energy, manufacturing capacity, and the over-reliance on complexity are necessary to improve the resilience of nations that do not have the most favourable starting conditions. So overall, quite an interesting article highlighting that climate change is very likely to give us a bit of a shock at some point. Moving on to the next web page, this is the ocean cleanup. Now, they have drone ships and various methods to collect rubbish and plastic and all sorts of things from rivers. They also have stuff out in the sea now. They're trying to find solutions to clean up the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. They're just an all-round amazing company. Well, they're not really a company, more of a charity. And this is one that I might put up as an option for the next lot of donations in 6 months. And I mean, for example, you can go here and buy a pair of sunglasses, and these have been made with plastic from the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, and of course all the proceeds go towards the continuation of the cleanup, so you can get some cool sunglasses with a cool story behind them and help fund this amazing program that they're running to stop plastic from even being in the oceans. They're trying to plug up rivers in a sense, and going out and doing the Great Pacific Garbage Patch and the various other patches that are like that around the world. And interestingly, they also have a plastic tracker, so I'm going to go to that on the next page. So here we have the plastic tracker. With this you can put in where you live, or any country really, and it will draw a trajectory of where your plastic could end up. There's a 30-second video here, so I'm going to just put this on, and it explains how the tracker works. There you go, that's what ocean cleanup are all about. They track the plastic, they figure out where it's going to go, and they go and intercept it. So as I say, you can use the plastic tracker yourself and draw a trajectory. This is the final story of my video. Hopefully I haven't gone on too long. Anyway, so this is climate change. Make coal history, says Prime Minister after climate warning. This story comes from bbc.co.uk and came out on the 9th of August. Coal needs to be consigned to history to limit global warming, says Prime Minister Boris Johnson, describing a UN report on climate change as sobering. Now he's referring to the IPCC report that we looked at earlier. He said that the world must shift to clean energy and provide finance to help countries at risk from changing climates. The landmark study found it was unequivocal that human activity was responsible for global warming. Green campaigners said the UK must halt planned new fossil fuel projects. Despite the call to end the use of coal, the UK is considering plans for a new coking coal mine in Cumbria, as well as proposals to tap a new oil field near Shetland. The report by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, which is the UN group on the science of climate change, said climate change was already here and causing chaos in some places. Its authors said that some of the changes, including rising sea levels, would not be reversed for hundreds or maybe thousands of years. The publication comes less than 3 months before the UK hosts a key climate summit known as COP26 in Glasgow. Mr Johnson said, "Today's report makes for sobering reading, and it is clear that our next decade is going to be pivotal to securing the future of our planet. We know what must be done to limit global warming, consign coal to history and shift to clean energy sources, protect nature and provide climate finance for countries on the front line. The UK government, which has adopted a 2035 deadline for a 78% emissions cut, is due to publish its strategy on cutting UK emissions to zero overall by 2050 this autumn. Net zero means cutting carbon emissions as far as possible, then balancing out any remaining releases, for example by tree planting. The UK is leading the way, decarbonising our economy faster than any country in the G20 over the last 2 decades, the Prime Minister said. I hope today's IPCC report will be a wake-up call for the world to take action now, before we meet in Glasgow in November for the critical COP26 summit. The UK has already drastically reduced the use of coal, with consumption falling from 61 million tonnes in 2013 to 8 million tonnes last year. But the country remains dependent on other fossil fuels such as natural gas, which provides most home heating and about 40% of electricity. The Climate Change Committee, the UK's independent advisor on tackling climate warming, says the UK has adequate policies for only 2 of 21 key areas in eliminating carbon emissions. The government faces challenges both on the international stage and closer to home. The biggest will be to persuade the international community to sign up to meaningful measures in Glasgow at COP26. Some 70% of the world's economy has signed up to a net zero target. Ministers want that to be higher. They're looking at the G20 in particular to drive change. At home, an increasing number of Tory MPs are worried about the cost of the UK's own targets. Will the infrastructure be in place to support the mass use of electric cars? And who will pay for more expensive boilers in homes? Ministers want to bring costs down through investment, incentives and mass production, but the specifics will matter to British pockets and politics. The report said that the world would reach or exceed temperature rises of 1.5 degrees centigrade, as seen as a threshold beyond which the worst impacts of global warming will be felt over the next 2 decades. Almost every nation on Earth signed up to the goals of the Paris Climate Agreement in 2015, which aims to keep the rise of global temperatures well below 2 degrees centigrade this century and to pursue efforts to keep it under 1.5 degrees centigrade. Alok Sharma, the COP26 president, said that one of the key messages of the report was that the future is not yet written, and 1.5 degrees centigrade is still an achievable goal, although it is retreating fast. He said based on the conversations he had had, there was a clear desire among governments to keep the 1.5 degrees centigrade within reach. But he said that far more was needed in terms of action, adding that the cost of inaction on climate change is far greater than the cost of action. So rather a damning report there from the IPCC, and let's hope that the UK can do a bit more to get to where we need to be, because it's important. Lives are at stake. That's it. End of story, really. So let's talk about how you can help. Firstly, you can recycle absolutely everything you possibly can. You could use less single-use plastics, using reusable coffee cups, bottles, jars, soap dispensers, and try to choose refills or compostable or cardboard packaging. You can use companies like Oddbox that actively work to ensure that all vegetables find a good home and aren't rejected by supermarkets. I will be including some links in the description of this video. I've just recently found a really good one in the US where you literally choose what you want, but it's all stuff that's odd shaped or a different size to normal, etc., like Oddbox. If you want to join Oddbox, it's a weekly or fortnightly or 4-weekly delivery. It's entirely up to you. how often you get a delivery. You can choose a different size of box. You can have just vegetables, you can have just fruit, or you can have a mix of the two, and there are 3 different box sizes. If you want to join Oddbox, just go to oddbox.co.uk, and if you put my name in, Andrea Clark, with an E at the end of Clark, then you will get a £10 discount on your first box. I will also get a £10 discount, but I will give that £10 to charity. So that will go to Rewild. So that leads on nicely to supporting charities like Rewild, who work all over the world to help reverse the effects of climate change through local initiatives and so forth. Also, ocean cleanup, as I showed you earlier, as well as other initiatives that help fight the effects and possibly reverse or at least pause climate change and climate destruction. You can also support businesses and politicians who take an active interest in the prevention of climate change and destruction, and you can join groups or volunteer your time to actively take part in climate repair schemes in your area. And you can also cut down or stop the consumption of meat to help reduce emissions. Well, if you've got to the end, thank you for watching the whole video. I might start doing these twice a week, as I am inundated with information and news. It's hard to choose what to put in each video. I hope you like my new theme song. It's deliberately cheesy and upbeat, like me. And please do comment below with feedback, ideas, and if you find something that you think I should talk about. All feedback's useful. I am new to this and still learning, so, help me out if you feel that something's going wrong. So, finally, please like, subscribe and hit that bell icon if you feel inclined. And finally, stay safe, stay well, and be yourself in everything you do.